65 years ago, something happened that rock and roll fans still talk about to this day. It was the one and only time when the biggest band in the world, the Beatles, came face to face with the man who defined rock and roll himself, Elvis Presley. The year was 1965. The Beatles were in the middle of their US tour, riding high on Beatlemania. Crowds screamed wherever they went. Their music was topping every chart, and their fame was reaching new heights. But even as global superstars, there was still one figure they looked up to, the king of rock and roll. On one rare night off, they decided to pay Elvis a visit at his luxurious Beverly Hills mansion. It was almost 11 p.m. when John, Paul, George, and Ringo arrived. Imagine the scene: a lavish living room bathed in red and blue lights, a jukebox humming in the corner, a crescent-shaped couch in the middle, games tables scattered around, and a fully stocked bar. This wasn't just any house. This was the Palace of the King. At first, the meeting wasn't smooth. The Beatles were a bit uneasy. Elvis was surrounded by his massive entourage, about 20 people, watching the Fab Four's every move. The atmosphere was awkward, heavy, almost intimidating. For a moment, it seemed like this legendary encounter might end as nothing more than small talk. But then, Elvis did something unforgettable. He asked for guitars to be brought out. And just like that, the tension melted away. The king of rock, and roll and the Beatles, four young men from Liverpool who had once idolized him, sat together and started to jam. No cameras, no microphones, no stage, just pure music. It was a private performance, a once-in-a-lifetime session that only a handful of people would ever witness. Paul McCartney would later admit that this meeting almost never happened. For years, the Beatles tried to meet Elvis but were blocked, mostly by Colonel Tom Parker, Elvis's powerful manager. Paul even hinted that they were seen as a threat to Elvis's crown. But during their stay in Los Angeles, the stars finally aligned. This was their chance, and they took it. George Harrison later said it was one of the greatest highlights of their entire American tour. John Lennon, on the other hand, confessed he was nervous as hell. But John was also the first to break the silence. He boldly asked Elvis why he had moved on to softer ballads in movies instead of sticking to the raw rock and roll that had once electrified the world. It was a daring question, but it showed just how much the Beatles respected and even longed for the Elvis they grew up admiring. Unfortunately, no photos, no film, and no audio recordings exist of this extraordinary night. But those who were there, like Tony Barrow, the Beatles' press officer, swear it happened. Barrow remembered the jam session vividly. He couldn't recall every song they played, but he was convinced they rocked out to the Beatles' own hit, I Feel Fine. Barrow later said something that still haunts music fans today. If only there had been a recording of that night, it would have been worth millions. But it wasn't to be. And so, the story lives on through memories, interviews, and anecdotes. One magical night in Beverly Hills where legends collided. A night when the Beatles, the band that reshaped music, forever, finally stood face to face with Elvis Presley, the man who inspired them in the first place. It wasn't a concert, it wasn't a press event, and the world never got to see it. But for those who were lucky enough to be there, it was pure history being written in real time. This was more than just a meeting. It was the passing of a torch, a symbolic moment where the old guard of rock and roll welcomed the new, and though no cameras captured it, the night the Beatles met Elvis Presley remains one of the most legendary untold stories in the history of music.